Welcome back to Tech Path, where we cover a lot of topics around EV, AI technology, kind of really breaking down the industry, both from an aspect of market movers, some of the things that are happening on Capitol Hill that affects a lot of this type of technology. And today we're going to dive into back on electric vehicles and really kind of who the winners and losers could be with President Biden's new stimulus plan and his new strategy for electric vehicles. Joining me today is none other than Mr. Andrew Horowitz from Horowitz & Company. Great to have you, Andrew.
Hey, how are you? Nice to see you. Looking good.
Nice seeing you. I like it. Andrew, let's get into a little bit about kind of the move with Biden and his strategy around his green energy elements that he's kind of put into play. Obviously, he's been the most active president in terms of doing executive orders in his first week. I think he's up over 30 now. So a lot of things are happening. And one of the big ones was his big claim to fame here of putting all government vehicles into an EV fleet, essentially. My thoughts to you are two-part, is who are the potential company players that could kind of jump into this? Let's first jump into the camp of Tesla and GM. What are your thoughts on both those companies making out big with this particular strategy?
So, I mean, I don't really see a lot of government workers driving around in like a Model S or the truck or anything like that, right? On the Tesla side. But Tesla definitely has a play in this. There's no question. They obviously go after government contracts as much as possible. You know, you look at all the things they've done with tax credits, what they've done with SpaceX, you know, not SpaceX, but, you know, well, I guess with SpaceX too, with all of what they're doing in terms of their tight-knit relationship with the government. So, and as being the name in EV, right? They definitely have a shot here. In terms of GM, in terms of Ford, I do think there is something to be said, because don't forget, we also have the Buy America, Build America that was part of that package that came through, right? The idea that we are going to absolutely buy not only from America, but with American parts. And that is going to wrap into this, 650,000 vehicles that's trying to turn over. Now, a lot of questions with this. You know, what's the time frame on this? How is it going to actually happen? Is there a particular area that's going to get it first versus others? But there's a lot of ancillary, I would say, knock-ons with this as well. So I think GM is an interesting place. Ford, clearly, as the American car companies that have the production capability and capacity to do so. And I think on the heels of the announcement today with GM trying to go carbon neutral by 2040, being all EV by 2035, pop the stock a couple of percent because everybody's just all excited about anything electric. You know, it's an interesting phenomenon that's going on, but it doesn't end there, I don't think, right? There's a lot of other companies that have some opportunities in this space.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, if we look at the numbers here, as of 2019, there were 650,000 vehicles in the federal government fleet. This had 173,000 military vehicles, 225,000 post office vehicles. I don't know sure how those would work. And then most of those vehicles are traveling ridiculous miles, which is where EVs, you know, the claim to fame, if you look at Tesla's million-mile battery claims. But I would argue, I think we could see, you know, a FBI fleet could easily go to a Model S. You know, most state inspectors could probably drop into a Model Y. They need a lift back. You know, the Model 3 is a great price point, so that's probably going to be the replacement of the old Ford Taurus, which was kind of the cornerstone of government vehicles in the past. But even with all of that strategy, like you're saying, is that there's a ton of companies that could surround this. And there's a few I want to kind of mention here in a minute. But before we go there, the charging companies themselves, if we get this many government vehicles
that's the thing I was going to mention. That's the extra. There's a couple of them out there. There's others that are not publicly traded, of course. You have two major companies right now that we can look at, like we can look at Blink Charging, LNK, which is a company, as full disclosure, that I own, and has a long way to go to get to real profitability out there. But basically, this is the biggest issue, because if you think about one thing you mentioned, which is the million-mile battery, or even the 500,000-mile battery, even the 200,000-mile battery, forget about that. We have to charge it on a regular basis, and you have you have a postal worker that's, delivering mail in those weird trucks that the wheels on the wrong side and all that stuff, right? And you need some kind of a cargo van of some sort. But forget that. You need to charge this thing, and you need a fast charging. You need something.
Sure.
So Tesla does have their fast chargers, of course. That's built into their ecosystem as well. And then you have, how are those going to be charged? What's going to be do that? It's going to be solar. Look for a solar compatible charging system and a bank system. Again, like what we see that is available from Tesla and others are doing. But Blink charging clearly is one, because we need to make sure we have the availability to find a place to plug in real quickly, as is on a lunch break, because you're not going to have, listen, last thing you want is a military vehicle saying, not much energy going on here. You're not much going on. Last thing you want is your mail to be held up because you're not getting full capacity of that. So you got that. You have SBE, which is Switchback Acquisition, which is a SPAC that came out, that they are also building that whole area out. So we're seeing that company as well, and there's a lot of interest in those too. You can go down to all the other things too, like the more specialized tires. You can look at the battery companies.
Right.
There's a whole ecosystem and network that really has to be looked at when it comes to this whole idea. But generally speaking, I think that it's going to be very, very profitable for some. GM comes out with this announcement today. Why? Because they want to make it, hello, just to let you know, we're in the running phase. It's not we're not just going to all of a sudden lose our contracts with the government.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, and I think that's something that I look at when, in my opinion, and again, this is not financial advice to you guys listening out there. These are basically analysis that we look at here on the show. But when you look at what Biden's administration is trying to do of, really kind of bring back American jobs, all that kind of strategy, even though Tesla is an American company, there are some arguments there. But I do think GM is actually poised for a very good position. I just, it'll be a matter of time, I think, before we start seeing government contracts maybe dropping on GM, especially around the Chevy Bolt and their new kind of their crossover SUV version of that car, which I think could be the car to really watch here. If Chevy's capacity or GM's capacity for EV manufacturing and batteries, because I could see 100,000 of those cars hitting the streets. Just from a government aspect, if GM were to get that kind of play, what do you think would happen to GM? Do you think they'd start to double down on this? Obviously, their stock price is going to start.
Stock prices is a relative high recently. I mean, we've seen a major move on Ford and GM recently, and it's kind of fascinating that all of a sudden we're enamored with car companies again. It's kind of funny, actually, because
I love it.
It's kind of like, hey,
back in the day.
Right. Many years ago, it was like, hey, I want this great car. And then there was that period of, I don't know, 10, 20 years, like, that's the car I got. You know what I mean? Then all of a sudden it's now back to, hey, I got this really interesting car, a lot of cool features. You want to sit in it and just check it out. Back in the day, one of my first cars, I bought it because I liked the radio. That was kind of like the way it was, right?
Yeah.
And then you kind of look for other things like fuel efficiency, and you look for price. But now what the big question is going to be is, what is these government contracts going to look like? I mean, on margins for many of these companies, because one of the things that some of these companies, Tesla not so much anymore, but they really had their margins boosted by tax credits, tax credits, and that was a big issue. And they're not going to probably get those from the government that are buying the cars, if you follow what I'm saying. It's a different scenario. It's right from the government, so they'll probably cut that right out of the deal. So margins are a big issue, and you have to look at that as in a comparison. Then you also have to look. Listen, you have to also. We can't ignore what's going to happen to fuel prices. 650,000 cars on the road not fueling.
Yeah,
now, it's going to transfer over. It almost reminds me of the time when recently we saw that a Philip Morris bought Juul, right? And
put them to bed
because they were bleeding.
Yeah,
less people were smoking, but they were doing an alternative. You got to wonder if an Exxon or
comes in and tries to buy one of these.
Yeah, it starts to really make these and puts them in their gas stations as an alternative.
Well, I mean, that's a huge thing. If you could see the especially if you go in the energy business. I mean, obviously they have the positions in terms of real estate And definitely the infrastructure, I think it's just a matter of changing the dynamics of what they're doing there. That would be an intriguing thing. Obviously, when you reference fuel prices, because I'm still on that same camp of, Tesla, of course, pops out 500,000 cars last year. They're starting to spin up Giga Texas. We could see 600 to 700,000 cars in 2021 from Tesla.
Right.
GM starts to really ramp up. Ford's jumping into the game and trying to catch up. I mean, we could see a million.
Fisker, and you have 5 other companies.
Lordstown, yep.
And then you have stuff overseas. You have NIO and you have BYD.
Well,
for
but for the U.S. market, we could see 1 million cars within the next couple of years being sold annually, meaning EVs.
Yep.
That kind of implant into our society. I mean, I live out here in West Broward, and I feel like this is a Tesla showroom out here. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Every other car is a Tesla.
Right.
So
interesting also is you have to wonder what will be the new model for fueling stations. So most people, when they get a car, I know you have a Tesla, don't you?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And you have probably one of those superchargers in your garage or somewhere or wherever it is, right?
Yeah, one charges up in 4 hours and I'm ready to go.
Right. So you'll plug it in overnight, you just let it do its thing and you're fine. But what about people that want to utilize maybe a gas station? Well, it may take for a quick charge, let's just say they get a little bit extra in there, 20, 30 minutes. Well, maybe the designs of things like Cumberland Farms and Wawa and the new designs of Speedway and things of that nature, these great things. I was just in one in Texas, was one of the coolest ones I was at. I forgot the name of it, in Houston.
That's a good point, because in our own area here, Wawa has implemented a Tesla bank. There are 16 chargers over at one of the Wawas. It's right off of it's literally walking distance to the C-store. So you get out of your Tesla, you go in and get your Slim Jim.
Right.
You're back at your Tesla in 18 minutes, and you've got your 30% that you needed, to kind of move on.
Great place for food trucks or a quick restaurant.
Yeah, there you go. But my point is that we are going to see a movement quickly back to the issue of oil, because this obviously is going to hit the energy companies.
Sure.
Within the next 5 years, we could see a reduction. I mean, this could be 20, 30, maybe even 40% reduced oil consumption here in the United States. That would really change the landscape of the energy business.
Yeah, it's good and bad, right? It's this constant shift that we see right now. This has been a theme for the last number of years, especially since, I would say, the advent of the very aggressive moves with companies going to apps, trying to change the world with what is nothing more than a similar product that now is app-based and much more convenient. So there's a lot of convenience factors that are going on right now. And I think that when you look at what's happening with this change of the energy, there's winners and losers, because a lot of jobs will be lost in fracking. People may say that's great. A lot of jobs will be lost in the oil refining business. Maybe people say that's great. But it's kind of like what happened to coal and what happened to a lot of other industries over the years. They'll adapt, some will die. But the fact is that when you look at this, I think that there is, almost an equal movement of people that are required to work on the other side. Right. Yeah. It's kind of a middle of the road. The problem will be it will be different people. Yeah. That's where there's people that are miserable, people that are happy.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, the job transfer is definitely going to occur. I mean, if you look at Giga Texas and the surrounding infrastructure that plant alone is going to take, in the state of Texas. Interesting selection by Elon, too. Right in the heart of truck country, right in the heart of oil country. And you're dropping in basically a battery-powered car manufacturing plant. So it'll be interesting how all that takes place. I wanted to run a couple of companies by you because these are, like you mentioned, there are a few challenges, especially from a government contract, but also just in general as companies look at changing out their fleets to maybe EV for delivery and all those kind of things, even going down to the bus systems, which itself. So there's a company called Green Power Bus, a completely electric bus system for basically, picking up kids and going to school. So thoughts on how and if those companies, Green Power Bus, Bluebird, which is a complete line of type A, C, and D school buses, and then Canoe, which looks like a VW bus. I mean, literally.
Canoe's more of a cargo vanish kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, there's a lot of these startups out there and a lot of companies that are coming to market right now. I would think that obviously school buses, I mean, I'm not sure. One of the problems I have with all this is what do we do with the old stuff? That's a big question, right? I mean, maybe they'll start turning school buses into little apartments that people can get. Remember how they did that with the cargo, ship cargo containers? They'll start doing that and make it cool, maybe put in your backyard against the back wall like they do. But in terms of this, I don't see any reason why we can't have an electric school bus. Clearly, you go and you drive and all, and it stops and doesn't do anything for a while. Recharge it, for the same thing. Yeah. You look at maybe like the cross-country bus is a little bit more challenging for that area, but they are getting more carbon neutral using natural, or not carbon neutral, but more energy efficient and less carbon footprint by using some other fuel sources. The one that I like in the area of, I'll call it small trucks, if you will, is Workhorse. Workhorse has a kind of a interesting couple of different vehicle designs, but they do have a pending, or at least a proposed contract with the post office. This has been going back and forth and back and forth. And when there's an idea that it's going to go through, the stock starts moving. And then all of a sudden, the post office, as we know them being a very slow mover, it seems to take the stock down. But they seem to have something at least presented and planned for the post office, and that could be really beneficial for that company.
Yeah. When you look at it, kind of the current administration, Andrew, and kind of where Biden is somewhat kind of showing his hands in terms of the number of executive orders he's done, most of which have been done around COVID, but a lot have been going towards the green energy space, obviously really kind of taking hard stances on fracking and kind of old line energy. Your thoughts on his first 2 years of office, how much this is potentially going to affect tech stocks? We won't even get into Silicon Valley on this particular topic, but tech stocks and kind of the evolution, especially around EV and AI, especially on autonomous vehicles in the US here. What are your thoughts on kind of where this could hit?
I mean, I'm not quite sure that any of these executive orders nor governmental edicts of any sort, laws, legislation that's passed is really going to impact AI that much. In fact, I would just propose the following, and quite opposite, that there is the potential for the Democrats, who now have both the House and the Senate and, of course, the president, to look into some of the monopolistic tendencies, the potential for these companies to be too big, like the Facebook and what they're doing. They're talking about breaking up Facebook and Google and looking at all these companies. I'm not sure how it looks with that, with Amazon and all, but I really don't know necessarily, aside from the fact that there's really cheap money out there, that technology has been ramping at a dramatic pace. I just not sure if these things, aside from the EV and aside from the things that are going on there, are really the things they're really looking to enhance. I just don't see that.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to watch. I think the key here is going to be especially their position on Silicon Valley, which could, to your point, kind of pave the way into other categories. I mean, if you listen to Elon Musk much on AI, which we talk about on this show quite a bit, he's a little bit fearful of where our advancements are and how quickly we are going to ramp up, obviously, autonomous vehicles. I'm pretty amazed just, with the Tesla I have every day of what its abilities are. So just seeing that process occur, especially with the way they kind of do their whole software updates, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. And Florida, here in the U.S., is one of the few states that has approved full autonomous vehicles, which will be interesting if Tesla pulls off a cat in the hat and puts the robo-taxi fleet to work down here.
Which is something he talked about in his earnings. I mean, it's Florida. I'm in Florida too. It's anything goes, it seems, down here. It's like the Wild West all of a sudden,
It's the new, well, with the exception of the problem of getting solar roofs, trying to get that done in the state.
Which makes no sense.
Yeah. Anyway, Andrew, it's always good talking to you. Great having you on the show. I love to get your picks and your insights on kind of where you're going. We definitely want to get you on another show talking about some of the most recent things on GameStop. So we'll definitely jump on to that topic as well. Thanks for stopping in today.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, so you guys are listening over on iTunes, Spotify, all the podcast apps, or maybe catching us on YouTube. Make sure and subscribe. TechPath, of course, really drills down into electric, AI, and general technology kind of moving our society forward. So if you have an idea for a show or have someone you think should be on, shoot us a email to producer@revernetworks.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time.